A Very Royal Narcissist, Part 5. If you were expecting Meghan Markle, I decided to give her a rest. Poor Meghan. This horrible, nasty HG Tudor fellow, beating down on her with his awful prejudice ways. What a terrible human being he must be. Instead, she gets a little respite, but don't worry, not for long. She is the gift that keeps on giving, and so we'll be returning to Ms. Markle in due course. Now it's time to turn to a different royal narcissist, and of course there are many to choose from. And he presented himself on a plate when this was originally generated back in November 2019, but still is meritorious and applicable for us to take a walk through the behaviours of this particular individual to determine whether this is another very royal narcissist. And this time, under the Tudor scope, it is Prince Andrew, rumoured to be the Queen's favourite child, as a consequence of him arriving at a time when the Queen and Prince Philip were enjoying more harmonious relations, and she was able to spend more time with him. Whether that's true or not is ultimately irrelevant with regard to this analysis, because we're going to put under the Tudor scope Duke of York, or as he's sometimes known, Randy Andy, and perhaps now the Duke of Porky Pies, which for those of you unfamiliar with rhyming slang means lies. The Duke of York was second in line to the British throne. He's now 8th. During his younger years, he earned the nickname Randy Andy on account of his fondness for the ladies, his relationships with the American actress Koo Stark and Sarah Fergie Ferguson, with whom he has 2 daughters, being 2 of his prominent relationships. He has gained a reputation for arrogance and is also nicknamed Air Miles Andy as a consequence of his lofty expenses, in particular his habit of taking a helicopter to perform official duties when he could easily have taken a car instead. For example, in 2009, he took a helicopter from his Royal Lodge home in Windsor to an engagement in Shoreham, West Sussex, at an estimated cost to the taxpayer of £6,000, roughly $9,000 or so. The journey would have taken 1 hour and 27 minutes to drive, and would have used only about half a tank of petrol for the round trip. He has received press attention for his questionable activities and business practices, which include his friendship with Tarek Khatuni, who the Duke of York has known for over 10 years. Khatuni is a convicted Libyan gun smuggler who also attended the wedding of the Duke of York's daughter, Princess Eugenie. His friendship with Saif Gaddafi, the second son of the former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, and his second wife Safia Fakash. He was a part of his father's inner circle. In February 2011, David Cameron, the then British Prime Minister, faced calls in Parliament to strip the Duke of his role as trade ambassador over his friendships with Gaddafi and Khatuni. In October 2010, the Duke hosted a business lunch at Buckingham Palace for Saker El-Matari, the son-in-law of the now-deposed Tunisian President, Zine Al-Abidine Ben Ali. Mr. El-Matari is under investigation for money laundering. He hosted trade talks with Muammar Gaddafi in 2008. He claimed expenses of £620,000 British pounds in 2010 in his role as Special Representative for International Trade and Investment for the United Kingdom, on top of the £249,000 he's paid by the taxpayer for his royal duties. Reputed multiple meetings with Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, an individual who has faced repeated accusations of corruption. The sale of his home, Selling Hill Park, purchased by a wealthy figure in the Kazakh regime, Timur Kulibayev, for a £1,500 million sum after 5 years on the market, for £3 million more than the market value. Kulibayev is alleged to have used corrupt funds to make the purchase, something that he denies. In May 2016, a fresh controversy broke out when the Daily Mail newspaper alleged that the Duke had brokered a deal to assist a Greek and Swiss consortium secure a £385 million contract to build water and sewage networks in two of Kazakhstan's largest cities, while working as British trade envoy, and that he had stood to gain a £4 million payment in commission. The newspaper published an email from the Duke to Kazakh oligarch Kengiz Rakishev, who had allegedly brokered sale of the prince's Berkshire mansion, Sunning Hill Park, and claimed that Rakishev had arranged duties for the consortium. After initially claiming that the email was a forgery, Buckingham Palace sought to block its publication as a privacy breach. The palace strongly denied the allegation that the Duke had acted as a fixer, calling the article untrue, defamatory, and a breach of the editor's code of conduct. In March 2011, Kay Stearman of the Campaign Against the Arms Trade told Channel 4 News CAAT sees Prince Andrew as part of a bigger problem. He is the frontman for UKTI. Our concerns are not just Prince Andrew, it's the whole UKTI setup. They see arms as just another commodity, but it has completely disproportionate resources. At the London office of UKTI, the arms sector has more staff than all the others put together. We are concerned that Prince Andrew is used to sell arms, and where you sell arms, it is likely to be to despotic regimes. He is the cheerleader-in-chief for the arms industry, shaking hands and paving the way for the salesman. In January 2014, Prince Andrew took part in a delegation to Bahrain, a close ally of the United Kingdom. Spokesperson for CAAT, Andrew Smith, said, "We are calling on Prince Andrew and the United Kingdom government to stop selling arms to Bahrain. By endorsing the Bahraini dictatorship, Prince Andrew is giving his implicit support to their oppressive practices. When our government sells arms, it is giving moral and practical support to an illegitimate and authoritarian regime, and directly supporting their systematic crackdown on opposition groups. We should not allow our international image to be used as a PR tool for the violent and oppressive dictatorship in Bahrain." Accordingly, the Duke of York has either embraced or moved within circles of individuals of questionable reputation. Might this just be the hazard of being a prominent royal and something one comes across in the role of special representative for international trade and investment? Or is this pattern indicative of someone who has no issue with such individuals, who has a broken moral compass, no emotional empathy, haughtiness, a sense of entitlement, and a rejection of accountability? These questions have found an answer as a consequence of the Duke of York's friendship with the deceased convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and the repeated allegations that the Duke of York was involved in the sexual abuse of a young girl. In March 2011, it was reported that the Duke's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, an American financier and convicted sex offender, was producing a steady stream of criticism. Sarah, Duchess of York, disclosed that the Duke helped arrange for Epstein to pay off some of her debts. The Duke was photographed in December 2010, strolling with Epstein in Central Park during a visit to New York City, according to the Daily Telegraph, a British newspaper, while negotiating this financial help. In July 2011, the Duke was reported to have cut all ties with Epstein, and the Duke's role as trade envoy was terminated that month. In January 2015, there was renewed pressure for Buckingham Palace to explain the Duke's connection with Epstein. Peter Osborne, writing in the Daily Telegraph newspaper in January 2015, stated that the proven facts are grim enough. What was the prince doing in the first place with Epstein, a paedophile who was jailed in 2008 for soliciting young girls for underage prostitution? Such a question smacks of either a terrible lack of judgment or simply not caring as a consequence of having no emotional empathy, a significant sense of entitlement, and no concept of accountability for one's actions, including one's choice of friends or contacts. The same month, Virginia Roberts Giuffre made allegations of sexual impropriety against the Duke in court papers relating to civil action in Florida arising from her connection to the Epstein case, but to which the Duke was not a party. Roberts claimed that the Duke was among men, including former Prime Minister and Alan Dershowitz, who had sex with her while she was a teenager. She alleged Epstein paid her £10,000 to have sex with the Duke. She asserted that she had sex with the Duke on 3 occasions, including a trip in 2001 when she was 17, and again in New York and on a private Caribbean island. Flight logs showed that the Duke and Virginia Roberts were in the same places she alleges when the sex happened. The Duke and Roberts were also photographed together with the Duke's arm around her waist, although Andrew's friends have repeatedly claimed that the photo is fake and edited. Roberts said she was pressurised to have sex with the Duke and wouldn't have dared object, and feared leaving as she felt Epstein, through contacts, could have got her killed or abducted. Roberts repeated the allegations against the Duke and against Epstein in a sworn legal statement under penalty of perjury. Buckingham Palace stated that any suggestion of impropriety with underage minors is categorically untrue, later repeating the denials. Lawyers for Roberts claimed a request of the Duke for a statement under oath about the allegations were returned unanswered. When the Duke was asked about the allegations by a journalist at the World Economic Forum, he refused to answer and left the room. Dershowitz said, "She's lied about me. She should not be believed about anybody else. It must be presumed all her allegations against Prince Andrew were false as well." Dershowitz initiated legal proceedings contesting the allegations, and he and Epstein were suing the lawyers representing Roberts. In response, Virginia Roberts stated that she would not be bullied back into silence. On the 7th of April 2015, Judge Kenneth Mara ruled that the sex allegations made against Prince Andrew in court papers filed in Florida must be struck from the public record. Mara made no ruling as to whether claims by Roberts were true or false, specifically stating that Roberts may later give evidence when the case comes to court. In August 2019, court documents associated with the defamation case involving Ghislaine Maxwell revealed that a second girl, Joanna Sjoberg, gave evidence alleging that Prince Andrew had placed his hand on her breast while seated with Roberts in Epstein's mansion, whilst posing for a photo with his spitting image puppet. Later that month, the Duke released a statement emphasising that at no stage during the limited time I spent with Epstein did I see, witness or suspect any behaviour of the sort that has subsequently led to his arrest and conviction. Though he expressed regret for meeting him in 2010 after Epstein had already pleaded guilty to sex crimes for the first time. By the end of August 2019, the New Republic magazine also published an email exchange between John Brockman and Evgeny Morozov from September 2013, in which Brockman mentioned seeing a British guy named Andy receiving a foot massage from two young Russian women at Epstein's New York residence during his last visit to the mansion in 2010. He then added that he realised the recipient of Irina's foot massage was His Royal Highness Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Despite the denials, or silence, a pattern of behaviour is evident. Against this backdrop of mounting public pressure and claims which appear to have some prima facie weight, the Duke of York was interviewed by British journalist Emily Maitlis on a television programme, Newsnight, which was broadcast in November 2019. It is this particular interview which gives us considerable insight about the Duke. The following points arose from the broadcast, and I provide you with my analysis also. Number 1. The Duke of York does not regret being friends with Epstein. Prince Andrew has defended his relationship with Epstein before, including as recently as August, 2 weeks after the disgraced and now dead financier apparently took his own life while waiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Lack of awareness, lack of remorse, sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy. In the BBC interview broadcast, the Prince gave more detail about why he still did not regret the friendship. Notwithstanding mounting pressure and an opportunity to reconsider, the refusal to regret underlines the lack of emotional empathy. It also questions whether Prince Andrew actually has any cognitive empathy, his sense of entitlement, and the repeated need of the individual to assert control over the situation. The suggestion that he should regret his friendship with a criminal, and a particularly vile one, is challenge fuel. It challenges his sense of entitlement to be friends with whoever he chooses, and challenges his lack of accountability to be held responsible for such a poor decision. These challenge his constant need for control, and the response to this threat to control is to reject the challenge, to nullify it, and offer no remorse, no sense of regret, and no apology. The Duke said knowing Epstein had some seriously beneficial outcomes, at a time when he had left a career in the Navy and begun one as a trade and industry special representative. Deflection, improper justification. The end always justifies the means. Prince Andrew said, "The people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful." Sense of entitlement, lack of awareness, improper justification. His reason for visiting the convicted paedophile to end their friendship? "My judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is," he said. Grandiosity, magical thinking, dismissive. Number 2. The Duke of York met with Epstein's ex-girlfriend recently. Prince Andrew has always said that he met Jeffrey Epstein in 1999 through the financier's then-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, a well-connected socialite who is currently the subject of investigations with regard to her own involvement with Epstein and would form a very narcissist scrutiny under the Tudor scope. Ms. Maxwell, a daughter of the late newspaper tycoon Robert Maxwell, a deceased narcissist, has generally kept a low profile since claims about Epstein began to emerge. But the prince said that he met up with her earlier this year, before Epstein was arrested and charged over sex trafficking allegations. She was here in the UK doing some rally, the prince said. He said they didn't discuss Epstein during the meet-up. There wasn't anything to discuss about him because he wasn't in the news. It was just, we'd moved on. Flippancy, arrogance, lack of accountability. The prince stressed throughout the interview that he and Epstein weren't that close. Revision of history, deflection. Invitations Epstein had received to events at Windsor Castle and at Sandringham were in the financier's capacity as Miss Maxwell's +1, rather than as a friend in his own right, he said. Deflection, blame-shifting, splitting hairs, lack of accountability. 3. He met Epstein in 2010 to put an end to the friendship. Much of the interview with Mateless focused on why the prince went to stay with Epstein in 2010, following Epstein's conviction and imprisonment for soliciting and procuring a minor for prostitution. The prince said that the visit was to explain to Epstein that their friendship was over, although apparently he wasn't that close to Epstein, but still regarded him as a friend and one whereby he felt compelled to fly several thousand miles to explain that the not close friendship was now over. Contradiction, lie, compartmentalisation. This is also at odds with the allegation that the Duke was actually there negotiating for financial assistance, something which Sarah Ferguson confirmed was the case. Clearly a not very close friend willing to pay off the debts of the ex-wife of the not close friend. Contradiction, lie, sense of entitlement. He said he had considered speaking to Epstein on the phone, but decided to meet him face-to-face to show leadership. Arrogance. "I took the judgment call," he said, "that because this was serious and I felt that doing it over the telephone was a chicken's way of doing it, I had to go and see him and talk to him." See contradiction of other points made earlier, suggesting the use of lies. Also demonstrates a lack of awareness as to how such an interaction would appear, given Epstein's previous conviction. Number 4. Being shot at during the Falklands War meant that he had stopped sweating. The interviewer, Emily Maitlis, asked the prince for his response to allegations against him made by one of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts. Roberts said that she had met the prince in 2001 when she dined with him, danced with him in a nightclub in London, and had sex with him at Ghislaine Maxwell's house in Belgravia. Maitlis pointed out that Miss Roberts' accusations were very specific and included that the prince had been profusely sweating. The prince said that a problem with Miss Roberts' story was that a medical condition meant that he couldn't have been sweating. "I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and it was almost impossible for me to sweat," he said. He accused her of therefore lying. A picture revealed in the press of the Duke of York leaving China White nightclub in 2001. He's clearly sweating, and indeed sweating his tits off. In case you didn't know, the Falklands Law was in 1982, nearly 20 years earlier from Andrew sweating his nuts off, leaving China White nightclub in 2001. Lie, arrogance, revision of history, need to assert control, projection. The photograph of the Duke with his arm around Miss Roberts' waist. Prince Andrew revealed he had investigated the possibility that a photograph, or elements of it, provided by Miss Roberts was fake. In the photograph, which no doubt you've seen, certainly looks like him, but of course photographs can be doctored. but this rebuttal must be looked at in the terms of the explanation given and against the backdrop of all of the other behaviours he has exhibited. One reason the prince gave was his attire. I don't believe it's a picture of me in London because when I go out in London I wear a suit and a tie, he said. That's what I would describe as, those are my travelling clothes if I'm going overseas. However, newspapers have previously pictured the prince wearing jeans without a tie or blazer on a night out in London. Lie, contradiction, deflection, desperate explanation to assert control, denial. Speaking about the photograph with Miss Roberts, Prince Andrew told Newsnight, nobody can prove whether or not that photograph has been doctored, but I don't recollect that photograph ever being taken. Denial. He also said that he didn't believe the photograph was taken in the way that had been suggested, because it shows the prince's hand on the woman's waist. I am not one to, as it were, hug, and public displays of affection are not something that I do. The picture is at a private party, not a public occasion. Responding to the allegations that he'd spent time with Miss Roberts, Prince Andrew said, I've no collection of ever meeting this lady, none whatsoever. Revision of history, denial. On Miss Roberts' claims that he bought her a drink, the prince said, I don't know where the bar is in Tramps. I don't drink. I don't think I've ever bought a drink in Tramps whenever I was there. The prince is a bona fide teetotaler, and has been for a large part of his adult life. He said he didn't know where the bar was. However, pictures taken on multiple occasions between 1983 and 1990 place him at Tramp nightclub. This demonstrates that he has been at Tramp nightclub on many occasions, and even though he might not drink alcohol, this doesn't prevent someone from knowing where the bar is, especially in a place that is regularly frequented. Lie. Flight records from Epstein's private jet, dubbed the Lolita Express, placed Miss Roberts in London on the day in question following a whistle-stop tour from Palm Beach, Florida, to Canada, Paris, Granada in Spain, and Tangier in Morocco, before touching down in Luton on March 9, 2001. This corroborates Miss Roberts' version of events. Number 6. Pizza Express. The Duke said the day on which Miss Roberts' allegations are said to have happened, 10th of March 2001, he wasn't out in London but was at home with the children. He said he had taken his eldest daughter, Princess Beatrice, to a party at Pizza Express restaurant in Woking at about 4 or 5 p.m. And then, because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule in the family that when one is away and the other one is there. He added he remembered the occasion weirdly distinctly because it was one of only a couple of times that he'd been to Woking, and going to the Pizza Express there was a very unusual thing for me to do. He may well have been at Pizza Express then or on another occasion. It isn't outside the realm of possibility, but given his penchant for high-end tastes and the clear lies and contradictory behaviour he's engaged in, looking at his response through that lens means that it's far from the realms of possibility. Number 7. Caribbean Orgy. Andrew's third alleged sexual liaison with Miss Roberts is said to have occurred around the time of her 18th birthday on Epstein's private Caribbean island, Little St. James. Putting the claims to the prince, Emily Matis, the interviewer, said, in a legal deposition of 2015, she said she had sex with you 3 times. Once in a London house, when she was trafficked to you in Maxwell's house, once in New York a month or so later at Epstein's mansion, and once on his private island in a group of 7 or 8 girls. Andrew said the incidents had not taken place, but he stopped short of accusing Miss Roberts of lying. I'm not in a position, he said, to know what she's trying to achieve, but I can tell you categorically I don't remember meeting her at all, he said. Denial, revision of history. I do not remember a photograph being taken, and I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact whatever. Circular argument, repeated assertion of the need for control. In a 2015 legal deposition, Miss Roberts said that she and Andrew had sex during an orgy on the private island with other girls, who she said looked under the age of 18, who didn't speak English. These allegations were struck from the record in the United States. Flight logs show that Miss Roberts arrived in the United States Virgin Islands on April 11th and then took a boat transfer to Epstein's private island next door. A group, including Miss Roberts, Epstein, Maxwell, and a finance manager turned aspiring politician called Gwendolyn Beck, then departed the island 5 days later for Epstein's mansion in Florida. The court circular doesn't indicate where the prince was during this period. However, by April 15th, Easter Sunday, he was reportedly in the Bahamas. He had been absent from the Queen's Easter service at Windsor Castle, and a courtier told the Daily Telegraph that he was on holiday at the exclusive destination, about a 2-hour flight away from Epstein's island. Miss Beck, a Donald Trump fan who was given thousands of pounds by Epstein when she unsuccessfully ran for Congress in 2014, said she had been on Little St. James in the days preceding April 16, 2001. In a previously unseen email to a freelance journalist sent in 2015, she claimed the prince arrived very late at night, stayed for the following day, and left early the following morning. He was in the bungalow next to me, she claimed. I heard no strange noises or anything unusual. If anything, he was flirting with me, but as I mentioned before, I was in love with someone else. Boundary violation, sense of entitlement. Finally, with regard to the interview itself, one particular moment encapsulated what the Duke of York is. There was a moment towards the end of the interview with Prince Andrew when Maitlis was unable to conceal her astonishment at what she was hearing. Did he, Miss Maitlis had asked, feel any sense of shame at his association with the convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein? The prince's reply was, do I regret that he, Epstein, has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes. Unbecoming, said Miss Maitlis incredulously. He was a sex offender. By labelling the conduct of a convicted sex offender as unbecoming demonstrates without any doubt that the Duke of York lacks both emotional and cognitive empathy, no sense of remorse, and blames Epstein for his behaviour, but does not offer any recognition or acceptance for his own behaviour by being and staying friends with Epstein. Of course, it suited the Duke to do so. It enabled him, through sex and money, two of the most potent ways of manipulating people, to assert control, and Epstein granted access to those two things, just as the various dubious rulers and businessmen have granted access to financial resources, as detailed earlier in this video. The response to this interview was almost universal condemnation, bewilderment, and the conclusion that it made matters worse for the Duke. Former Buckingham Palace press officer Dickie Arbiter described the interview as excruciating. Asked about the Prince's decision to be interviewed by BBC Newsnight's Emily Maitlis, Mr. Arbiter said he thought many questions would be asked in Buckingham Palace. He said, "They will be wondering, was this the right decision? Was the right decision made? Who made the decision to put him on? Did he make it himself, or did he seek advice within the palace?" My view is he bulldozed his way in and decided he was going to do it himself without any advice. Sense of entitlement, arrogance, I know best. Any sensible thinking person in the PR business would have thrown their hands up in horror at the very suggestion that he puts himself in front of a television camera to explain away his actions and his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, continued Arbiter. He added that the interview was not so much a car crash, but an articulated lorry crash. Mr. Arbiter said he believed the interview would have an impact on the Duke of York's relationship with various charities. The BBC's royal correspondent, Johnny Diamond, said that the Prince was very damaged by the interview, and the opportunity to clear his name had failed badly. Royal biographer Angela Levin said that she was gripped by the interview, but felt it was ill-judged to offer insights into his life with Epstein. Unfortunately, she said, it was a sign of his arrogance. He's always been arrogant. The Queen's motto is don't complain, don't explain. I think in her heart she'll be extremely embarrassed. I know for a fact Prince Andrew doesn't listen to his advisers. A very senior member of the press team left suddenly 2 weeks ago, and the implication is he would not have approved of what Prince Andrew did. Arrogance, haughtiness, poor listener, lack of awareness, wrecking ball behaviour. Yet, notwithstanding observations such as those described, the Duke of York stands by his decision to take part in an interview about his links to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, sources told the BBC. Rigidity of approach, lack of awareness, always knows best, need to maintain control to the repeated challenge responses of commentators and observers. People close to Prince Andrew said he wanted to address the issues head-on and did so with honesty and humility, magical thinking, grandiosity. But what did the British newspapers make of the interview? It was, the Financial Times wrote, one of the royal family's most misjudged forays on television, eclipsing even those of Prince Charles and Princess Diana on the collapse of their marriage. Always knows best, lack of awareness, sense of entitlement. From the I newspaper, it was the Newsnight horror show, one of the weirdest royal interviews ever. The Guardian stated that the Prince faced disbelief and fury on both sides of the Atlantic over the defence of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. It said that he was under growing pressure from his critics here in the United States to apologise to Epstein's victims. In the paper's own view, there was a grotesque mismatch between the Duke of York's language and demeanour and the gravity of the allegations. Lack of emotional empathy, lack of cognitive empathy. But the Daily Mail reports that the Prince has told friends he regrets he didn't make it clear he had great sympathy for anyone who was abused by Epstein. False contrition, too little too late. When I said I was shocked, I thought that was implicit. He is quoted as saying, lack of emotional empathy. The Mail's Richard Kay says, the jaw-dropping insensitivity of it all left millions of viewers, not just in Britain but around the world, asking why. Well, Richard, the answer is at the end of this video. Why on earth had he agreed to do this, and what was he thinking? He describes the interview as one of the most egregious acts of self-harm by any member of the royal family. According to the Sun newspaper, the Prince told the Queen that his interview had been of a great success. It was, the paper says, his craziest claim yet. Grandiosity and magical thinking. The Times newspaper says that Buckingham Palace insiders, while taken aback by the reaction, believe it will be possible to judge the impact of the interview only after the dust has settled. They were bracing themselves at the time for several days of negative publicity. In the Times' view, Prince Andrew's broadcast equivocations were an embarrassment and a disgrace, said the monarchy stands mired in scandal as a result. His position is probably irretrievable, it suggests, adding, the first step in extricating the monarchy should be his retreat from a public role and a long period of silence. The Telegraph's main cartoon shows a puzzled diner at Pizza Express in Woking inquiring about a dish on the menu. That's our new one, the waitress replied. It's called the alibi. And in its editorial, the Telegraph newspaper stated that as an exercise in making a bad situation worse, it has few equals. Since Prince Andrew saw this interview as an opportunity to put the record straight, it is surprising that he was so ill-prepared for the line of questioning, it says. It's got nothing at all to do with being ill-prepared and everything to do with his arrogance, lack of accountability, and sense of entitlement. The Duke of York has exhibited through this interview and his behaviours previously a complete lack of emotional empathy, intermittent absence of cognitive empathy, arrogance, haughtiness and being dismissive, boundary violation, the exhibition of the need for control, the exhibition of a threat, the exhibition of a response to the threat to the need for control, the telling of lies, deflection, false contrition, lack of remorse, improper justification, the end always justifies the means, lack of awareness, always knowing best, silent treatment, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, objectification, revision of history, blame shifting, projection, circular argument. There is clear evidence, time and time again, of his narcissism. What then of his cadre? He has a taste for the expensive, is quite clearly an individual who is known for repeated sexual liaisons. He likes the high life. He has a keen interest in money and getting his hands on it no matter what is required. He's not the brightest of individuals, and whilst he may have some more intellectual pursuits, they rank far behind his somatic tastes, and it's very clear that he is a somatic narcissist. What about his school? His arrogance, his haughtiness, his love of the good time, his superficiality, the false contrition that was occasionally manifested, his lack of remorse, the improper justifications that he advanced, the fact that he basically goes through life like a wrecking ball, bowling people out of the way, that he's gruff and haughty, is quite happy to be on the take, indicates, alongside the fact that he has elevated status and financial success, that he would be appropriate not as a greater, because he has no self-awareness, no Machiavellian behaviour, doesn't operate an appropriate facade, and he does not have the intellect associated with the greater narcissist. Mid-range is a possibility, but ultimately he's not passive-aggressive enough. And he is not intelligent enough, nor operating sufficient facade to be upper mid-range, although his haughtiness and arrogance is at home there. Within the lesser, he's clearly not an out-and-out loser that's lower lesser or middle lesser, but his rampant sense of entitlement, his desire to transgress boundaries in the pursuit of money and sex, the fact that he demonstrated no remorse and at times didn't even appear to really understand what he'd done wrong, all points that he belongs within the lesser category. But given his superficiality and his running around in terms of getting the best deal for Andrew, along with his sexual proclivities, means that he is a narcissist, and he's an upper lesser type A somatic. The Duke of York is indeed a very royal narcissist, and once again, not one commentator, television broadcast, or newspaper, for all their condemnation and amazement, was able to identify precisely what was driving his behaviour. But now you all know. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.